What's up, everyone? Welcome back to SANDCAST, Beach Volleyball with Bourne and Travis Mewhirter. I'm doing a rare intro for an episode this week. It's the episode, man. I can't remember a time I've been more excited to record an episode than this one. We have Dr. Nate Zinsser. He's the author of The Confident Mind. You guys have, if you've been a long time listener to the show, you've probably heard this book mentioned at least a dozen times. First introduced to me by Zana Muno when we had her on the show, and then I read it, and I've since recommended it to everyone who would listen and a ton of people who would. It is pretty much required reading at Florida State. It impacted my volleyball career. Just the hockey puck is the only way I can and measure that improvement that I got in results, in how I felt, in confidence. And I was so stoked when Doc Z, as he's known, when he agreed to do the podcast. And so just wanted to give a little intro. If there's one, everyone knows I'm a pretty big reader at this point, if you've been listening to the show for a while. And they ask, what are some of the most impactful or helpful books that I've read, especially in the sports department? This one, number one by the long shot. The Confident Mind came out in 2022 or 2023. It's pretty new, and as we talk about, there's in the works potentially Confident Mind 2.0. I just wanted to give this quick intro. This is a goldmine of an episode. This book is a goldmine of a book, and I'm just so grateful for the time that Dr. Zinsser took with me to chat about all things confidence, the mental side of sports. It is so dang useful. So enjoy, share, and let me know what you guys think, because I'm just, it was a highlight. All right, everyone, shoots.
All right, Doc Z, we're recording now. We have Dr. Nate Zinsser, as I mentioned in the lead up, author of The Confident Mind. It's just gonna be blurred out on the screen right now, but most useful book I've ever read in terms of my career as an athlete, and now it's paying a lot of dividends as a coach, because I get to kind of share your wisdom. And as we talked about, every girl on the Florida State beach volleyball team has a copy of The Confident Mind, and I actually had to borrow one of theirs to to flip through it again to prepare for this podcast. So, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that you're a busy guy, and B, thank you so much for writing the book. And because again, it's the lessons I've taken away from it, they go way off the court as well. So, welcome to the pod, Doc, and my gratitude to you.
Good morning, Travis. Thank you for having me on. This is a treat for me. I'm looking forward to this dialogue.
So the title of the book, The Confident Mind, and this has been an area of expertise for you for a long time. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, with confidence, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's kind of an innate thing. Whereas a lot of what you write about in The Confident Mind is that it's a learned trait, no different than a skill in any sport or a lift in the weight room, where we can strengthen it with regular practices. How
Uh,
would you go about strengthening, building that confidence muscle, so to speak?
well, you got to act. Confidence is basically the collection of everything that you think about yourself and everything that you think about your game and everything and all the thoughts you have about everything that happens in your game. So, in order to exercise the confidence muscle, you have to be somewhat careful, somewhat selective about how you think about yourself and your game and everything that happens in the game. Okay. Just as you have to be careful, selective, and I might say consistent in terms of exercising the muscles that allow you to attack a ball, get up in the air, hit for a point. You have to exercise the various muscles within your brain that build a collection of thoughts and memories that produces energy and optimism and enthusiasm. Um, you are quite correct. The misconception is rampant. Oh, I just wasn't born confident like so and so was. Um, I'm not sure so and so was necessarily born confident. They may have had a little more luck in terms of how they were encouraged to think about themselves and their game and what happens in the game than you were. But they were not born with, you know, a much that different a brain, you know? Sure, there's people with different proportions of slow twitch and fast twitch. Oh, but we've learned that we can influence the growth of both slow twitch and fast twitch. So we're not necessarily stuck with something in that regard, nor are we stuck with habits of thought.
And it's
So I'm constantly hammering with people. Okay, you can have confidence. I don't care how much you have now or how much you don't have. You can have more. Let's get busy.
and we talked about kind of exercising a couple confidence exercises. I think one of the toughest parts about confidence is, in beach volleyball, for example, we can work on a skill and we can see that improvement. If I'm working on a high line and one day I can hit 4 out of 10 in the target that I set, and a month later, now it's 6, and a month after that, now it's 8, I can see that progress and improvement. It's very tangible. Is one of the biggest obstacles that you see in confidence is the intangible manner in which it's measured, because it's a feeling. It's not something. I'm a 7.5 that I measured today on my confidence meter. It's so internal.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is an intangible. And because we live in a society and a culture that loves numbers and statistics and observable behaviors, okay, he completed this many passes for this many yards. She hit this many balls, like you say, to this range of a target. Because we live in that society and we live in that world a lot, we tend to overlook the intangibles until we start struggling. And then we realize that, hey, yeah, I don't feel certain about myself, as you say. So, no, you can't, it's hard to put a number on that feeling necessarily. Um, but one thing that you can kind of quantify, if you will, is the amount of time that you spend recalling successes, victories, improvements, and the amount of time that you spend recalling, ruminating upon losses, imperfections, inadequacies. Okay. It's not ridiculously precise, but it's quite useful, you know? Um, I was talking to a fella yesterday who is a candidate for the NFL draft, and he's training right now for the scouting combine, where he will be inspected from every angle. He's got to stand on a scale in his skivvies and have a whole bunch of coaches and scouts, eyeballing him. And he was honest enough to say in the course of our discussion, yeah, my breakdown of thoughts about myself and my abilities and as a football player are kind of maybe only 30% encouraging and 70% discouraging. And so I have to point out when I hear that, and I hear that kind of breakdown a lot. I say, if you were to be taking a math test or a history quiz and you answered 30% of the questions correctly, what kind of a grade would that be? Not real good, Doc. Okay, don't take this the wrong way, pal, but I don't think you got a great attitude. If the quality of your thinking is only consistent with the quality of performance that you want 30% of the time. If 70% of the time when you think about your game, you're thinking about breakdowns, problems, difficulties, etc., you're probably not encouraging your muscular system, your cardiovascular system, your endocrine system, your perceptual apparatus to help you in the moment. That's the point that everybody's got to get. And once they get that, they say, okay, I got to change the way I think.
And there's two examples that you bring up in the book that I wanted to ask about. One is with Tony Gwynn, one of the greatest hitters of all time in baseball. And you mentioned that when he did film, he would cut it up and he would have his hits in one file and his strikeouts and bad at bats in the other, and he would just delete the bad at bats essentially. And he would just make sure that he was replaying his highlights, his successes over and over again, because that's what gets internalized and remembered. Then you have the other example of a lower stakes, kind of a rec softball player. All he remembers, he goes 1 for 4. All he remembers is that one hit. That's all he's talking about that night. And what I'm wondering, especially as a coach now, is it important for us to also watch those swings that we didn't get a hit on so we know what to improve? Where is that balance, I guess, between let's watch our highlights versus also let's watch where we fell short and work on how we can make sure that we don't repeat that in the future?
Yeah. Two things about that. That's a really important question. Um, my experience has been that most serious athletes, you know, and anybody playing for you, for FSU, is pretty serious about her game. Most serious athletes are highly sensitive to their mistakes and inadequacies and breakdowns and imperfections. They know that. They know that what they gotta get better at. Um, and they only need to be reminded of that by their coaches, by their teammates, a small proportion of the time. Okay. Looking at your highlights, recalling your highlights, and the highlights can be with a capital H or a small h. Um, Basically, that serves to reinforce what you want more of, right? So why wouldn't you spend the majority of your psychological time reviewing what you want more of? Um, in neurological terms, every time we re-experience in our memory and every time we fantasize about a behavior in the future that we want, we literally stimulate a whole complicated series of neural connections. And similarly, if we rehearse, relive a mistake or breakdown or a disappointing experience, we stimulate another group of complicated neural connections. Um, which ones do you want to strengthen? Um, when you look at it that way, it's pretty obvious. So I guess the balance that we're talking about here is maybe 80% of the time I'm thinking about how far I've come, what I do well right now, how great I can be in the future. And maybe 20% of the time, you're thinking about, okay, I need a little more explosive get up off the ground. I need a little more lateral speed. Okay. I need a little more composure during those tough points. Um, but what's important, even with those 20% of, I guess you could call it negative thoughts, with those 20%, you got to be careful about the emotional valence that they carry. Oh, I suck because I can only do this. No, it's like, okay, I'm not good at that. Oh, but wow. How how great might I be when I add that skill, that capability, that competence to my already pretty substantial toolkit. All right. This is how you want to think about your imperfections. Dare I use the word inadequacies. Hope that clears it up for
Yeah,
some
no,
of your folks.
I think that's a great example. And you mentioned the nervous system and the power both and inadequacy of the nervous system. It doesn't do a great job of differentiating between what's real and what we imagine or play in our heads. And that's something I've been careful with as a coach. I don't know if you're familiar with Rob Gray's work.
No, I'm not.
He's sort of the father of this new movement called ecological dynamics. And he has a couple books out that have sort of built the foundation of my philosophies as a coach, but he talks about it where one of the biggest things that coaches, a bad habit that coaches use is saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. But if I say, hey, don't get your platform together early to an athlete, mostly what the brain hears is get the platform early because
Yeah.
it's don't is a cerebral thing, platform early is a physical, tangible thing. And you mentioned this a lot in the chapter on affirmations visualization, in that the power of us thinking about what we want to achieve versus removing a negative. And James Clear, he said it best too. And I thought about this a lot in when we moved from California to Florida, is running to something is a totally different energy than running away from something. And just
Couldn't
how
agree more.
just how powerful is our nervous system and our brain and what we want to put in our heads, and why do we always want to think about the direction we want to go versus removing what we don't want to go?
hmm Um, Mr. Rob Gray is dead on target. Um, I have been, I've been studying this phenomenon under, through various mentors for going on 50 years now, you know, and that idea of don't think of a blue elephant. Um, you, that statement requires some representation of a blue elephant. And if a blue elephant is something you don't want, then you probably don't want to be thinking about it. So, you as a coach, uh, establish your base this way, okay? Establish your base this way as opposed to don't do it that way, you know? Um, I spent a lot of time on sidelines. I've spent a lot of time on pool decks. I've spent a lot of time with the West Point volleyball team, and I have wonderful memories of coaches who were quite effective in encouraging players to pursue what was desired. And there were some other coaches who were very effective, unfortunately, in reinforcing the recognition of a bad habit under the mistaken impression that, oh, we've got to recognize it, we've got to identify it, we've got to be very clear about it before we can alter it, before we can address it, before we can generate new behaviors. Um, Neurologically, I don't think that process is necessary. Neurologically, all you got to do is think about how well you've done it. Think about how well you want to do it. Think about how great it's going to feel when you do it the way you want to do it. Think about how happy your coach is going to be when you do it the way that you've both talked about doing it. Um, that's how the change takes place.
And when we talk about visualization, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just how even still today, and I think that we're seeing a movement where mental practices like visualization, affirmations, journaling, they're becoming less taboo and a little bit less outside the mainstream. But you have that example of Alex Hutchinson, where he sees an 18% improvement just from the mental side of things. Everything physically, everything else was controlled to stay the same, versus an NHL player, physically exceptional, doesn't do the mental work and doesn't really pan out. Do you see it becoming a little bit more adopted, these mental health exercises, the journaling, the affirmations, the
Oh,
meditating, the breath work?
unquestionably, we have seen a paradigm shift in sports science over the last 10 years. It's really gotten powerful. Um, when I first began my mentoring of New York Giant quarterback Eli Manning in 2007, it was a black ops. We, I was I was forbidden to talk about it with pretty much anybody. Um, I was even reluctant to share it with my wife, who I trust with everything. Um, my my boss at West Point at the time knew that I was entering into a professional mentoring relationship on my own time um, with the New York Giants. But only even at the Giants, the head coach Tom Coughlin and the assistant coach, who I knew from my various connections in the coaching world, they knew about it. And the owner of the team, Mr. Mara, he knew about it. But that was it. Um, I was very careful entering the Giants training facility. It was very hush hush because in those days, oh, Eli Manning talks to shrink would have been all over the New York tabloids, and it would have been a horror show. And now Eli Manning talks about it all the time. Oh, yeah, the Giants have a full-time sports psychology person. And so do many, many, many NFL and MLB, NBA teams. It's become so much more accepted uh, for good reason. It
And
works.
I said you've navigated it. I mean, you've been there. You've been at West Point for multiple decades. I feel like you've seen it go from Black Ops mission to now it's pretty vogue. I don't know a single professional sports team that wouldn't have a sports psych. We have our own at Florida State Beach Volleyball. I think it's has it been a joy to you to see it pretty widely adopted?
Oh, yeah. It's been a joy to be both a beneficiary of the wider acceptance and to be both a force in creating that wider acceptance. Uh, I give certain people at West Point back in the late 80s and early 90s when this got started, I give those folks huge props because they were exploring this at a very traditional institution. You know, West Point was established in 1802. There are a heck of a lot of things at West Point right now that have not changed since 1802. You know, the institution has been comically referred to as, you know, 250 years of tradition uninterrupted by progress. Uh, so it was a remarkable movement that's first started very small at West Point to simply offer some training and mentoring in the psychology of success and growth to the football team and only the football team. Because the coach at the time knew that these intangibles were important. And the newly emerging science of sports psychology was the only source of actual practicable exercises that would lead to confidence, concentration, composure, these intangible things that everyone knew. So we were breaking some new ground back in the 90s, you know, right through the first decade of this millennium. Uh, and our so many of our grads bought into it, found it useful. They started teaching it to their soldiers around the country and around the world. And then they would reach back to West Point and say, "Hey, would you come and do a program, provide some resources?" And that snowballed and snowballed and snowballed and snowballed to the point where the big army was setting up basically clones of our West Point office at various posts around the country and around the world. So it's been very gratifying to see the evolution of this science, and it's been very gratifying to drive that evolution.
I bet it has. And I want to use Eli Manning as kind of the foundation of the next couple conversations. One, we've talked about the exercises um, for confidence. And with, you know, if we want to get stronger, our legs get stronger. We squat, we deadlift. And if we want to get better, hit a better high line. We hit a lot of high lines in volleyball. What are some exercises that we can do to develop confidence?
Well, I really I would say the equivalent of the deadlift when it comes to confidence development is the daily reflection on your workout or practice. Okay? This could be just a 5-minute exercise. I don't want it to take a whole lot of time, but it's really important. Reflect upon your workout, your practice session, your training session, and ask yourself 3 questions. One, where in this episode of my life did I invest some quality effort? Was there a station that I grunted through? Was there an exercise that I really wasn't looking forward to doing, but I did it? Okay. Where did I invest quality effort? Here, maybe here, maybe here. So there's 3 little nuggets, if you will. And the second question is, what did I succeed at in this training session, or what did I get right? Well, I got 8 out of 10 on target in this drill. I I protected my legs in the takedown drill against Billy. He never got to me. That's a little ka-ching win for me. All right. So looking for these little tiny successes. They're not going to be big, but you got to look for them anyway. And the third question is, what am I getting better at? Based on my experience today, and maybe my experience of yesterday and the day before, what's something I'm getting better at? Yeah, I am more explosive off the floor. Yeah, I am a little more accurate with making that dig and getting it in this direction. So the answers to those 3 questions, where am I putting good effort? What am I getting right? What am I getting better at? Those are kind of deposits in a psychological bank account. And that if you have enough money in that bank account, well, you got a heck of a lot of reasons to be certain about yourself when you step onto the court to compete. So if there's one thing that I'm urging people to do, it's examine your practice, examine your work, and extract from it episodes of effort, episodes of small success, indicators of progress.
The effort, success, progress. I've been keeping. I got a journal right here. I've been doing that since I read your book for the first time. I've got about 3 years of journals now with daily ESPs in there,
No,
and it's so one. It's I find it super useful for all the reasons that we've talked about, but it's also so fun. Say I'm having a tough week, a tough time, or I'm in a rut or a slump. I can go back to look at the stuff that I was excited about succeeding in 2 years ago, and it's child's play. And so it's like, okay, I can now have these tangible, measurable signs of progress and effort and success that I've deposited into that bank account over the last 3 years. And so I'm glad you said that one because I want to thank you for sharing that exercise. Because to me, that was aside from physical practice and actually getting out there, that was probably the most useful mental thing I did. One of the biggest sort of hockey sticks that helped me as an athlete was that daily ESP. And like you said, it's not a huge investment. It's 5 minutes. It's completely free. You just get a pen and a paper. And that's one of my favorite parts about all these mental exercises is they're free and you can do them anywhere, anytime.
indeed. That ESP exercise has been a paradigm shifter for a lot of people. Um, some of my clients are in the business world. They're CEOs, they're inventors, they're sales managers. Um, I'm recalling one particular CEO of a consumer products company who found the daily ESP to be an absolute paradigm shattering uh, concept. Because this fella, law degree, MBA, very knowledgeable, he had cultivated the habit of going home at the end of every day, thinking about all the things he didn't get done and all the things that were problematic. And when I encouraged him, okay, well, where'd you put in good effort and what'd you get right and what are you getting better at? He started doing it, and it changed his entire approach to life. He changed he personalized the ESP experience. He switched it around a little bit. Um, he said, he journaled his effort, and because of the effort, he was making progress. And because of the progress, he was experiencing more success. So he shifted ESP to EPS, which was useful for him as a businessman because EPS also stands for earnings per share. It's what business people are, you know, curious about and, motivated toward. So there's lots of ways this can be personalized, um, and it really can shift your whole sense of yourself. I guess that's the point.
And a similar book, The Gap and the Gain. I don't know if you've read that by Benjamin Hardy.
No, I don't know that one either. Thanks for these recs. I'm making a list here.
Yeah, no, anytime you want to talk books, I'm here for it. But it's interesting because you both use the example of Dan Jensen, the speed skater, who at the Olympics had kind of flopped a couple times, and then out of nowhere he breaks through. And what Benjamin Hardy recommends is doing what he calls his book's called The Gap and the Gain, and he said at the end of the day, write three wins that you had today and three wins that you plan to have tomorrow. And what's similar there, which I kind of look at as we talked about, little deposits in that bank account, right? But it's also handwritten stuff seems to be a pretty common denominator. What is especially in an age of technology, do you see a difference between typing it out on a phone, a computer versus I am a disciple of the handwritten word. I got all my notes for this handwritten. When I prepare to commentate or coach, all my notes are handwritten. Is there a difference, an extra stickiness to handwriting versus typing?
There is absolutely a higher degree of what you just referred to as stickiness when you pick up a pen and you scribble on paper versus tapping a keyboard. The technical term for what you're calling stickiness is neurobiological demand. In order to write your name on a piece of paper with a pencil or a pen, you have to engage a lot more muscles, a lot more nerves, a lot more of your biological apparatus, and a little bit more of your neurology, as opposed to tapping, Travis, on a keyboard. It's just more neurobiologically demanding, and henceforth, it's got a little more effect for you.
Yeah, it's good to, and I'm biased because I've loved handwriting, and I've just found it anecdotally, it just helps stuff stay in my brain
Yeah,
easier than when
yeah.
I type things out, and so it's good to know that there's a little science behind it too.
Oh, there is considerable science behind the neurobiological difference between writing a sentence by hand and tapping the same sequence of words on a keyboard. No question about it.
Now, I want to get back to the Eli Manning example. So you lead the book with Eli Manning, and you have three NFL examples where you have Eli, Michael Strahan, and Deion Sanders, and all inhabit a really different space of confidence. Where Eli, before he wins the Super Bowl, taking down Tom Brady the year before, he says, "Well, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact wording, but some of the effect of "I'm just as good as Tom Brady" or "I can compete with a Tom Brady." And the media, looking at the numbers, justifiably says, "Excuse me,
Yeah.
you had 25 picks last year. Tom Brady threw 36 touchdowns to four picks. What are we talking about?" Eli goes on to win one of the more famous Super Bowl upsets in recent memory. Then you have Michael Strahan, who I found this really enlightening that he was sort of the opposite, where all he thought about was not all that he thought about, but negative thoughts dominated his frame. And then you have the more bombastic Deion Sanders, who is saying, anytime that ball's thrown, that's my ball, despite the opposite being the case, and that actually the intention was it not to go to you. And so, what I'm wondering with an Eli Manning and a Deion Sanders, clearly they were confident, and Eli Manning had that confidence before he had really the evidence to suggest that he was as good as Tom Brady. How do we go about developing that, and where's the line between a little delusional and we're on the right track?
Yeah. All those guys, Eli, Big Mike, Neon Dion, cultivated the habit of looking for the best in themselves uh, at different points in their career. Um, Michael Strahan did indeed learn to focus on his golden moments on the field as opposed to the moments on the field where he got knocked out of the play or, and trapped or almost got to the ball carrier or the quarterback, but didn't. He learned to linger on his tackles, his sacks, his pressures, his contributions. Um, Eli learned how to do it as well. Um, I think Dion is one of those individuals, and I've never met the man, so I'm speaking somewhat speculatively here. Um, I think Dion learned perhaps earlier in his athletic career, high school, maybe even middle school, that it's to his benefit to think, I'm better than you, you know, whether whether he actually is or isn't is open to argument, etc. But it's pretty darn useful for him to think, hey, there he is lining up against, you know, Jerry Rice or Andre Reason or, um, you know, Randy Moss. He's lining up against really good players. If he's thinking, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, this guy is really fast, that just introduces a little tension that can inhibit his performance, that can lead to hesitation. Um, that's not very useful. Okay. It's much more useful for him to be momentarily delusional. I'm going to be with this guy, you know? And even if he gets beat, and let's face it, NFL quarterbacks get beat. The game is designed to victimize them because we all love to see the completed passes and the touchdowns. It's what brings the fans to their feet and creates the cheers and sells the tickets and sells the TV rights and the beer ads and all the things that drive the sports marketing business place. Um, Deion Sanders is going to get beat, and he's got to come right back to the next play and still think, oh, I'm okay. I'm going to kick your ass now. I'm going to beat you on this play. Now, is that delusion? Okay, maybe. Is it a functional delusion in the moment of competition? Yeah, without a doubt. Now, let's say that a whole lot of passes are completed against Deion Sanders in a given game. And then, you know, come Monday, he's got to be honest in the film room saying, okay, I bought his fate there. Okay, I didn't start my back pedal quick enough on this play. He's got to be realistic, perhaps. And he's going to spend Monday and Tuesday and maybe a little bit of Wednesday being analytical, judgmental, and maybe even self-critical of himself. Come Thursday into Friday into Saturday, he's rebuilding that delusion so that when he steps on the field on Sunday, it's like, that ball in the air is meant for me. I'm going to beat you on this play. Okay. You have to worry about me. I'm not worried about you. You got to worry about me because I'm going to mix things up and I'm going to make your life miserable. Um, so there is a time and a place for the analysis, judgment, and criticism. And there's a time and a place for that functional delusion where all I do is see, observe, I accept whatever is happening, and I'm 100% my own biggest supporter, biggest fan, biggest cheerleader. Every performer, whether we're talking a beach volleyball player, an NFL football player, a salesman, a research scientist, a surgeon, a musician, has to understand that dynamic and find a way to make it work in his or her own life.
And it's similar. So Dion, even though he wasn't a shooter, had what you would call the shooter's mentality, where we sort of suspend logic for a second. And the example that you brought up, Steph Curry and a basketball player, man, I forget his name, at the University of Virginia. He was 1 for 14 going in. They had a set play at the buzzer, and the coach was designing it reasonably so for someone else. And he says, no, 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 like we're going to me. I'm going to make this shot. And this despite that he was 1 for 14, but in his mind, the shooter's mentality, where probability says if I'm a 50% shooter, I'm 1 for 14, I'm pretty likely to make my next one. But then the other part, the reverse of that with the shooter's mentality is the more we make, the more we make. And just the hotter I'm getting. How do we develop that mentality where if we're missing, it's a good thing? If we're making it, it's a good thing.
How do we develop that? Practice. Okay. You got to practice it. And I guess before you can practice it, you have to accept the usefulness of it. You have to be able to separate, okay, it's not very logical. Okay, you're right. It's not logical. It's just useful as heck. And so every performer has to be able to accept the fact that thinking this way does indeed give me a better chance than thinking in the more traditional, logical, well, if I've missed 8 in a row, I'm probably going to miss the ninth one. You know, that's that's what a fairly narrow-minded scientist would would say. Look, the best prediction of future behavior is past behavior. True, okay. But is that helpful? Is it useful? Does it bring out your best? And every time I have this conversation about the shooter's mentality, there's some head scratching, there's some eye rolling, there's some no, I don't know, Doc, it's kind of far out. Yeah, maybe, but think about how useful it might be. And once you accept the utility of it, you can start to think, okay, I just missed 3 in a row. Ah, that means the next one is more likely to go in. Oh, yeah, that means the next one's a lot more likely to go in. Oh, I missed my 4th one. Well, now the 5th one is much more likely to go in. And then we flip it. And if we've hit our first 3 in a row, it's like, dang, good for me. I'm on a hot streak. Let's ride this puppy. Um, just it all starts with a certain acceptance of how useful it is, and then you got to practice. Practice to the point where, to the point where a guy like Stephen Curry can do it in the NBA finals if necessary.
And speaking of that sort of, is it useful or is it logical? Your chapter on plateaus, I had a question about because any athlete, anyone in any industry, we hit a plateau, no matter what it may be. And if it's say a couple of years, we just had a podcast with our good friend Savvy Simo. So she comes out of college, is in the USA pipeline, kind of is on a track going upwards, and then she hits that plateau. And for the last 2 years, and how do we know if we are sort of accumulating improvement that just isn't yet seen versus that definition of insanity where we're going to do the same thing expecting different results? Like, how do we know? And there's no right answer, or one way to answer probably, but if we're ready to make that breakthrough or if what we're doing to get us here isn't going to get us there.
Wow, that is a wonderfully insightful question. Uh, the definition of insanity is indeed doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it to produce different results or different outcomes. Um, I think the important part when you are on a plateau is to continue investing quality effort. Maybe you have to shift the drills that you're doing so that you're not doing the same old thing over and over again, but you have to continue to invest the same overall level of effort and the same overall level of enthusiasm. Maybe I'm going to do some different practice drills. Maybe I'm going to add a little more plyo or a little less plyo, or I don't know. But I am not going to drop my overall level of effort, and I'm not going to drop my enthusiasm about practicing and improving. I'm smart enough to realize that as I ascend in various levels of the game, the hypothetical ceiling gets closer. So my jumps, my increments of improvement are going to get smaller. You know? When you start out, the ceiling is far away, and every little investment of effort is going to produce a corresponding level of improvement. Um, at some point, that very steep growth curve levels. And at high levels of the game, and somebody training for the Olympic team is at a pretty freaking high level of the game. That growth curve is going to level off at times, and we're going to be on a plateau, and then we're going to experience a small degree of improvement, then we're going to be on another plateau. And the appreciation for the plateau seen as, okay, this is a fertile ground that is now growing.
Oh, I like it.
The seeds have not sprouted into great big flowers or great big trees. But the fertile ground is there. The seeds have been planting. The roots are going down. The sunlight is hitting it. The growth is happening. And at some point, boom, the flower bursts into full color. That's the way we got to look at our plateaus. And that is a real challenge given the immediate gratification element of our current culture. Okay? We want to know something, we look it up. We want to talk to somebody or send a message to somebody, bang, it's done. You're old enough to remember writing a letter, putting it in the post, putting it in the mailbox and having to wait 2 weeks for your friend in at the other end of the country to send you a message telling you about, what they got for Christmas or where they're going to spend their summer, you know.
Pen pals, never forget.
Yeah. We are so accustomed to instant answers, instant improvement in knowledge, etc., that we sometimes forget that developing our physical bodies, developing our skills sometimes requires a gestation period. Okay.
Have
And
you seen a difference in athletes in your time working? Because it's like when I was growing up, like we said, it wasn't this send a message, get a message. It was write a letter, wait, get the letter, wait, get your response. Have you seen a generational difference in athletes between how well they're able to navigate these lulls in improvement?
oh, no question. We are a much less patient society. Okay. Um, the online generation, as wonderful as digital technology and the internet and global connectivity is, has its downside. It's made us less patient. It's made us less thorough. Um, it's made us very, it's made us distractible to a dangerous degree. which is why I'm really glad that there are people who will sit on a cushion and simply observe their breath for 15 minutes. And you don't need a freaking app to do that. Oh, yes, I use Mindscape or whatever. I was like, really? Okay. Well, let me tell you a story. You know, I was 16 years old in 1971, and I learned something called transcendental meditation, which is a meditative process where you repeat a mantra that is given to you in a ceremony. No app, no points generated for doing it a certain way. You just freaking do it, you know? And you allow yourself to think about, okay, am I calmer under pressure in general? Do I sleep a little more soundly because I've cleared out a lot of the distracting noise that might keep me awake? You know, um, we tend to be, again, so distractible, and that ain't helpful. Even in a sport that is as fast and dynamic as yours, okay, you got to be able to stay in it. You got to be able to stay. I don't know what the average length of a point in beach volleyball is, you know,
Probably about 8 to 12 seconds,
about 8 to
depending.
12 seconds. Okay.
Well, maybe lower. Women's game around there, men's game probably cut that in half.
Okay. Well, how good are you at absolutely stopping any kind of internal discursive thought for 8 seconds?
It's hard.
Can you do that for 8 seconds? Okay. Okay. You've got 8 seconds where you need to be completely out of your mind and into your senses. And then you talk to your partner, da 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 da, you plan the next point. And what's the average gap between points in beach volleyball?
Internationally, there's a kind of a unofficial shot clock of 8 seconds. You get the
Eight
ball,
seconds.
server gets the ball, you got 8 seconds to
Yeah.
go.
So in those 8 seconds, you can analyze the strategic demands of the moment, communicate with your partner, make a decision on where you're going to stand to receive serve or how or where you're going to serve to if you're serving. You got 8 seconds to do that, and then you've got to get out of all of that and into the external environment, into the ball, into the movement of everybody on the court. So there's this constant flow. I'm in my mind, I'm out of my mind. I'm in my mind, I'm out of my mind. Um, if you don't practice that, you're in trouble. You know,
And that's
the average length of a football play is like 5 seconds. And then you've got 25 seconds before the ball has to be snapped, unless, of course, they cut to a commercial. And now you're standing around there on the field for 2 minutes, you know, until the guy in the red hat on the sideline does this and the action continues. But you've got to be able to, again, get get the play call, rehearse your assignment, take your position on the field, prepare yourself to launch, and then set hut. And you're in motion for 4 or 5 unconscious seconds. Um, you got to be able to do that. And if our mind is constantly searching from one website to another, from one, app to another, we don't develop the capability to be silent and be receptive to the external world.
And that was another question I had because a lot of the practices you go through in the book are stuff we can do off the court to prepare us in court. But are there any practices? Say I'm a basketball player and I get fouled going to the free throw line. I got a handful of seconds before I get the ball. Volleyball, I get the ball, going to serve, whatever it may be. I still think that playing golf was the best mental preparation I could do because You play golf for about a minute in a 4 hour round, and the other 3 hours, and you're just thinking.
Yeah,
But do you have any practices or just quick little things we can do when we're in the game in the moment to settle our mind and refocus us so we're not surfing our mental web?
indeed. This is where the idea of a pre-shot or pre-point routine is really important. I am moving back to the line to serve. I have to have a well-rehearsed, well-practiced routine. I use the code words CBA for this. C stands for cue up your conviction. You better have a couple really powerful personal thoughts that you practice saying to yourself, time to rock. This is for us. Ease and fire, for example. Queuing up your conviction, a short, powerful phrase that helps you think about what you want in the next point, etc. That is repeated and followed by some quality breaths. You know, depending on the time, there may only be one quality breath, there may be two or three, but the act of conscious, deliberate breathing requires that you bring your focus into the here and now because the breathing is actually happening in the here and now. It's a nice separation from, oh, this could happen and that could happen. No, air's going in, air's going out, air's going in, air's going out. I'm repeating my confidence conviction cue as I breathe once or twice or three times. And then we come to the A of CBA. Cue your conviction, breathe your body into the moment. A, attach your awareness. Attach your awareness to what's important. If I'm serving, it's that postage stamp size piece of the service court that I'm delivering to. If I'm receiving serve, it's the ball going up in the air, and now there's contact to the ball, and here comes the ball. I am pouring my attention, I'm attaching my attention to something specific. Okay? In beach volleyball, that those tend to be very, very small targets. You know, the quarterback in football has to come to center or stand in the shotgun and attach his awareness to a wide swath of field in front of him. And he sees the cornerbacks in the periphery, and he sees the safety and the linebackers in front of him, and he's pouring his attention into there. CBA. That is just a refinement of everything we've been talking about into a few seconds. And you got to do that over and over and over and over again. The golfer has to do it hopefully less than 70 times. The quarterback looks forward to doing it at least 70 times, marching down the field, ball control, etc. Your players have to do it too.
And in a lot of scenarios, say we're getting close to the end of a match. That's when nerves start to we get a little bit excited. And I think nervousness for young athletes, I think that it's kind of that fight or flight thing. And a lot of times it's flight. We get overwhelmed by them. But I love the way you described it in The Confident Mind, that it's this rocket fuel and we can choose to use it or not. And one of the more helpful descriptions I've heard of nerves was, man, it wasn't Brandy Chastain. It was someone on the U.S. women's soccer team. She said, I've got these butterflies. Now I'm just going to teach them to fly in order.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we change that relationship we have with nerves? Because then after that, when I got nervous, I got so excited. because I was like, man, I really care about what I'm doing right now, and that is so dang cool. And then on the flip side, when I wasn't nervous, I was like, dang, what's the problem?
Yeah, what's the problem here? I'm almost bored.
Right.
Yeah. Um, this whole issue of butterflies, nervousness, etc., uh, again, is I guess you could say it's just an aspect of overall misunderstanding, you know? Anytime the human being is involved in something that matters to him or her, your unconscious knows it, your unconscious autonomic nervous system knows it, and it's going to make some shifts in glandular activity and nervous system function so that you have a better biological chance of doing what you want. That that biochemical change can feel a little weird. And people misunderstand that feeling of weirdness for, oh, something is wrong here, rather than, oh, my body's getting ready to do something unusual and important. Hmm, okay. Now, once you accept that reality of human being, you can look at the onset of butterflies in the stomach, or a little twitchiness in the limbs, or cotton mouth, or sweaty palms, or having to run to the bathroom a bunch of times before a game. You can accept those as signals. Oh, that's your body's giving you, like you say, a rocket fuel to help you. And so, yeah, it's a little unusual, but I understand that it's there for a good reason. So I'm actually going to teach myself, remind myself over and over to be grateful for this, to look forward to the butterflies. Yeah, I like that excitement. Okay. I'm going to think of my butterflies as excitement rather than nervousness. Uh, it's the same biology, it's just a different interpretation or narrative that you choose to slap onto it. Okay?
And that's what I love so much about Teddy Roosevelt's Man of the Arena speech,
Yeah.
where he says, even if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly.
Hmm.
And then he mentions that the cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat,
Yeah.
where it's such a blessing to feel so alive, to do something that you care so much about that your brain starts sending, we could call that
Yeah.
rocket fuel, where you're like, sweet, I care about
Aren't
this thing. It's
aren't
awesome.
you a lucky individual to be doing something that calls this forward? Yeah. Uh, be grateful for it. Yeah.
And I want to be mindful of your time here, doctors. So kind of limit it to a couple more questions. But one, so beach volleyball, volleyball in general, we're viewed a lot of times as an Olympic sport. That's where we get on the mainstream. It's where people see us a lot. And we're in the Winter Olympics. I love watching the Olympics. And what's been fascinating to me that I've been thinking about is you have these athletes who have performed on their respective biggest stages, and then when you get to the Olympics, which is a stage of grandiose proportions, it's a different limelight. And then I don't want to use the word choke, but they don't perform up to their abilities. And I watched, so at the time that we're recording this, Michaela Schifrin's only raced once. Greatest slalom skier in the history of skiing. Won 7 out of 8 World Cup titles to start the season. After Beijing, didn't finish a single race. She kind of flops in the combined with Breezy Johnson, had the lead, finished 15th out of 18 in
Mm.
her portion of the slalom. Didn't fall. She just wasn't Michaela Schifrin. Last night I watched that sensational figure skater Ilya Malinin. Hadn't lost in 2 years. Gets to his free skate, falls twice, bails out of two of his signature jumps. Instead of going four, he goes one or two spins. And I'm just wondering, like, what is happening there? Where clearly these athletes have shown an ability to perform on their biggest stages. They get on a different one, and something happens where they're not themselves.
And you want an explanation?
I mean, and I know that you don't work with those two individually, but
Well,
I'm sure
here's
you have.
my suspicion.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my suspicion. Anybody stepping up to that level has to be able to say, okay, here I am. I deserve to be here. Let's go play ball. As opposed to, wow, this is the Olympics. This is big. People are looking at me. People are expecting a lot of me. I've got to prove myself here. So there's that little added piece of pressure that can account for these decrements at the Olympic or world class or Super Bowl level. Okay. Um, Young quarterback Drake May of the Patriots was way below his statistical averages in the Super Bowl. Okay. Shiflin did not deliver. There'll be plenty of other people who don't deliver at the same level at the Olympics. And my only explanation is that they put a little too much pressure on themselves because they knew they were in the spotlight. It takes a very disciplined mind to say, I'm skating the same program in the same size arena. I'm wearing the same skates. It's just another, it's just another event. I am not going to imbue it with great significance. Okay. I'm going to tell myself, hey, this is big, but I have earned the right to be here. I have earned the right to be comfortable here. That's what people got to get, you know? I remember encouraging, mentoring people to go to the U.S. Olympic trials. The U.S. Olympic track and field trials are the second biggest track meet in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's more talent in the U.S. Olympic track and field trials than there is in any of the professional races in Europe, you know? Not taking away anything from that, you know. But here you are, you've qualified for the Olympic trials, you know. Oh, my coach told me I should just treat it like another race, but it's not another race, it's the Olympic trials. Yeah, that's right. But you've qualified. You deserve to be here. You can either elevate your sense of yourself so that you believe that you belong, or you can de-emphasize the significance of the moment. It's not that big a deal. It's just another freaking race, just another freaking routine. Either way, or some combination of those, is vital so that you step into the Olympic spotlight and you are yourself rather than trying to be something different. That's the explanation, coach. Best as I
It's
can do.
it's that great scene out of Hoosiers where when he takes
Yeah,
the
yeah.
measuring tape, says, "How long is that basketball court?" Oh, it's the same the one we play at home.
Same thing we play on all the time.
How
Yeah.
high is that hoop? Oh, it's 10 feet. Oh, it's the same one we play in at home.
Yeah. Right. Can we keep some perspective there and not blow the importance of the national championship, the Super Bowl, the majors in golf or tennis, and certainly the Olympics? Can we keep it in perspective and not blow it out of proportion? You
I
know,
love it.
I've never met Schifrin. I do know that after her difficulties in Beijing, she hung out a little bit with the great Roger Federer, who encouraged her, hey, be in love with how far you've come, enjoy the gifts you have and the opportunities you have to express those gifts, and she went off and had a couple really good years.
Yes,
Yeah.
she did. Yes, she did, and she still has a couple more races. So I love watching her too, and so I'm hoping she turns it around and delivers because it was fun watching Nathan Chen a couple years ago, where he fell a couple times in his routine, and then 4 years later, next Olympics in Beijing, crushed it, dominated. And
Hmm.
so we'll see if Melanin can do the same. But hey, I appreciate your time, Doc. And before we go or anything, I want to make sure people know where to find you. Any stuff you have coming out. I don't know if we have the Confident Mind 2.0.
There's a lot of talk about that right now. Yes, indeed. And an updated and expanded edition.
That'd be exciting. I'll be on that list of pre-sales.
Okay. My best wishes to you and all your listeners, and please go forward with a confident mind and find out how good you really are.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Doc Z. And I think, hey, it's a great nickname. I'm glad that one stuck. I think it's solid.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
well, good luck to everything you got going on. Good luck up in West Point to all the teams that you're working with, and let's stay in touch.
Let's stay in touch indeed. Have a great one.
All right, Doc, you too.